Have you ever picked up the phone, called your child, and heard that all too familiar line, "Sorry, I just don't have time right now"? Or maybe it's not even said directly. It shows up in unanswered messages, last-minute cancellations, or long gaps between visits. And even though you try to understand, they're busy, they've got kids, work, life, there's still a little sting every time, isn't there? If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. It's one of the most common heartaches I hear from people in their 60s, 70s, even into their 80s. Parents who love their children deeply, but feel like they've been slowly pushed to the sidelines. And when you bring it up, gently of course, you might hear a well-meaning, "I'm just so swamped lately," or "I wish I had more hours in the day." But here's the part that's hard to hear, and even harder to accept. They're probably telling the truth. Yes, your child really might not have the time. Or at least not the time they're willing to give to you right now. And that, right there, is the real pain point. Not the hours on the clock, but the place you currently hold on their list of priorities. Now, before we go further, I want to be clear. This isn't about blame. This isn't about pointing fingers or feeling like a victim. It's about clarity. It's about understanding the difference between someone being overwhelmed and someone making choices. Because even in the busiest lives, people still find time for friends, for hobbies, for social media, for Netflix. If they can scroll Facebook for an hour, they could call. If they can meet up with coworkers after work, they could swing by on a Saturday. So when someone says they don't have time, what they often mean is, you're not where their time is going right now. And that's not easy to hear, especially when you remember the years you spent changing diapers, paying for braces, sitting at baseball games, or staying up all night when they had the flu. You were always there for them. Always. So naturally you ask, how did I go from being their whole world to being a background thought? But maybe that's not the right question. Instead of asking, why don't they have time for me? What if we asked, where do I stand in their life right now? Because when you start asking the right question, you stop chasing the wrong answers. You stop wondering what you did wrong or how to get their attention. And you start focusing on what really matters, your own peace, your own life, and yes, even your own joy. One of the biggest mistakes we make as parents, especially as our children grow into adults, is that we forget to release them fully. We expect to still be as involved as we were when they were younger. And understandably so, parenthood doesn't have an off switch. You don't stop loving them. You don't stop worrying. You don't stop hoping they'll call. But what you must stop doing, for your own emotional health, is tying your self-worth to their availability. Many of us bend over backwards to stay reachable at all times. We leave our schedule wide open just in case they drop by. We keep the weekends clear just in case they decide to invite us. We pick up the phone on the first ring, not because we're free, but because we're afraid they'll stop calling altogether if we miss it. And slowly, without even realizing it, we shrink our own life to fit into the few crumbs of attention we're hoping to catch. And I know, that might sound harsh. But it's the truth I wish more older adults heard sooner. Being endlessly available doesn't make you more loved. It makes you easier to take for granted. When your children know they can call at the last minute and you'll say yes every time, when they know you'll drop everything, no matter how small the request, they stop seeing the weight of your presence. It becomes expected, automatic, easy. And the easier it is, the less they value it. But let me tell you something powerful. The moment you begin building a life that doesn't revolve around them, everything begins to shift. Because let's say your son calls on a Tuesday asking if you're free for dinner that night. And for once you say, actually, I've got plans with my friend Carol tonight. How about Friday instead? That tiny moment does more than you realize. It sends a signal. It tells him, my mom has a life. She has people. She has purpose. She's not just sitting around waiting for my attention. And that changes how they see you. Suddenly, you're not the default person they fit in when convenient. You become someone they need to plan for, anticipate, respect. And no, This isn't about playing games or punishing your kids by ignoring them. It's about shifting the emotional dynamic in a healthy, balanced way. You're not closing the door. You're simply walking through other doors too. That's why I always tell people this. Don't fake a busy life just to seem independent. Go live one. Volunteer somewhere. Join a walking group. Sign up for a ceramics class. Start a garden club. Go to the library every Thursday morning just because it makes you happy. Build a rhythm to your days that makes you feel engaged, curious, and yes, even a little bit selfish in the best way. Because the more you pour into yourself, the less you feel drained by someone else's absence. And ironically, the more full your own life becomes, the more your children may start to notice that they miss you. We often think we need to win back their time by being more present, more supportive, more helpful. But what really brings people closer is space. Not distance, but depth. When your life has depth, people feel the difference. They want to be around that energy. They want to hear what you've been up to. They want to share their stories, not out of guilt or obligation, but because they enjoy your company. And that, my friend, is when your relationship starts to grow again. Not because you demanded more time, but because you became someone they're excited to make time for. Let's keep going. Now let's talk about something that's a little uncomfortable. The things we sometimes do as parents, with the best of intentions, that actually push our children further away. It's not easy to admit, especially when everything we're doing comes from love. We text because we care. We offer help because we want to feel useful. We call to check in, not to nag, but because we miss them. And yet, something still doesn't feel right. You sense a shift. Maybe they answer, but they sound distant. Maybe they keep conversations short. Or maybe they just stop picking up altogether. And it hurts. Of course it does. But here's the key. When adult children start pulling away, most parents instinctively move closer. We try to bridge the gap by offering more of ourselves. More time, more support, more advice. We show up unannounced. We text multiple times a week. We offer to help with laundry, groceries, grandkids, anything to remind them we're still here. But often, instead of drawing them in, that extra closeness starts to feel like pressure. You see, there's this delicate thing that happens when children become adults. They still love you, but they're trying to find their own rhythm, their own identity, their own balance between being a grown-up and being your child. And if they sense that you're trying to reclaim the closeness of their younger years, even in small, subtle ways, it can feel suffocating, like they can't breathe without disappointing you. And that pressure can cause them to retreat even more. One of the biggest mistakes I've seen, and I say this gently, is using guilt without realizing it. Phrases like, "I never hear from you anymore," or, "Well, I guess I'm not that important these days," may sound innocent, but they weigh heavily on your child's heart. And instead of encouraging closeness, those little guilt trips build walls. Even silence can be heavy. You might not say anything directly, but your tone on the phone, the long pauses, the heavy sighs, they all carry a message. And the message sounds like, "I'm disappointed in you." Now I know you may be thinking, but what if I am disappointed? What if I really do feel forgotten? Don't I have a right to express that? Of course you do. Your feelings are valid. But the way we express those feelings makes all the difference. Because if your goal is to rebuild connection, then you have to lead with openness, not offense. With curiosity, not criticism. Instead of, "You never visit me anymore," try, "I miss spending time with you. Can we plan something together soon?" Instead of, "You're always too busy," try, "I'd love to hear what's been keeping you busy lately." You shift the tone from accusing to inviting. And that makes all the difference. But let's go a step further. Because connection isn't just built in conversation. It's built in the energy you carry. And that's where something truly powerful comes in. When you stop waiting on your children to fill your calendar and start filling it yourself, something shifts. You become more than just mom or dad again. You become you. I've seen this happen with so many parents, especially those who are retired or whose children have moved out. Once they give themselves permission to start living for themselves, their whole posture changes. There's more spark in their voice, more stories to tell, more lightness, more laughter. And guess who starts noticing? Their kids. Suddenly, your daughter hears that you've started volunteering at the library on Tuesdays. Your son finds out you joined a local art group. Maybe you've been going to lunch with new friends, or attending a book club, or taking walks in the morning just because it clears your head. You're doing things that light you up, and it's magnetic. Because here's the truth, no adult child wants to feel like they're their parents' only source of meaning. It's a heavy weight, and it can lead to distance, not closeness. But when they see that you're okay, more than okay, when they see that your days are full and your heart is light, it makes them want to come closer. You stop being someone who needs them to feel whole, and start becoming someone they admire, enjoy, and want to spend time with again. I remember speaking with a woman named Helen. She's 74, lives in Arizona. For years, she felt neglected by her son and daughter. She said to me once, "I used to check my phone every morning, just hoping I'd see their names. But those messages came less and less." So one day, Helen decided to stop waiting. She joined a hiking group, started painting again. She even signed up for a beginner's yoga class, which she joked was more falling than stretching. But she loved it. A few months later, her daughter called. Not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but just to talk. "I've been seeing all your photos," she said. "You look so happy. It made me miss you." And just like that, something shifted. Not because Helen begged, not because she made her children feel bad, but because she stopped centering her life around their presence and started building joy without it. You see, the most powerful message you can send your children isn't, "Why don't you call me more?" It's, "I'm doing just fine, and I love when you're a part of that." That's how the door reopens. That's how love returns freely, not out of guilt, but out of desire. Let's keep going. There's a kind of freedom that comes when you finally stop chasing after connection and start creating wholeness from the inside out. For many parents, especially after 60, there's this invisible pressure to keep the family close, to hold on tight, to be available, to keep traditions alive. And while those instincts come from love, they can sometimes keep you stuck in a waiting pattern. You wait for the phone to ring. You wait for the next visit. You wait for them to remember. But life is too precious, especially at this stage, to be lived in a state of waiting. The truth is, your children's time may continue to be limited. Some seasons of life are genuinely overwhelming. And yes, sometimes their priorities may be different than yours. That's not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of the season they're in. But here's what's always in your control: how you choose to live your life. Because the moment you begin living fully, not halfway, not in the shadows of their schedule, you send a message without saying a word. You say, "I'm still here. I'm still growing. I'm still living a life worth showing up for." And that message can reach them in a way guilt never will. One woman recently shared with me how she used to keep her weekends totally free, just in case her son and grandkids wanted to drop by. It rarely happened. She spent many Saturdays sitting by the window, hoping, then feeling forgotten. One day she finally said, "That's it. I'm done waiting." She started taking Saturday cooking classes, something she always wanted to do. A few months later, her son called to ask if they could come visit that weekend. And for the first time, she said, "I'd love to, but I'm in a cooking class until 2. Want to come after?" And you know what happened? He came. Not just because she was free, but because she was alive in her own story again. That's the quiet beauty of reclaiming your time. You're not doing it to make them jealous. You're not doing it to be cold. You're doing it because your time still matters. Your joy still matters. Your life, today, tomorrow, 10 years from now, is still yours to shape. And believe it or not, the more whole and happy you are, the easier it is for your children to be around you. Because instead of feeling the pressure to fill your days, they get to share in your fullness. You become someone they can laugh with, learn from, enjoy, not because they have to, but because they want to. And if that connection comes slowly, that's okay too. You're no longer measuring your days by their calls or their visits. You're measuring them by how much life you're allowing in. So if you've been feeling forgotten lately, if you've been wondering why they don't have time, I hope you'll take a deep breath and remember this. You are not invisible. You are not a burden. And your time isn't over. There's still so much joy waiting for you, not in their plans, but in yours. And if you're not sure where to start small. A walk with a neighbor, a class you've always wanted to try, a hobby you used to love but set aside. Reignite your own spark. Because once you do, you might just find that others are drawn to your warmth. You've done the hard work of raising a family. Now it's time to raise your own spirit again. And if this message touched something in your heart today, I hope you'll let us know in the comments. You are part of a community here. You're not alone in what you're feeling. And your voice, your wisdom, your experience might help another parent out there feel seen too. If you found this video helpful, give it a like and consider subscribing to Strong Elderly Life, where we share practical, compassionate content to help you live with strength, purpose, and joy at every stage of life. You don't have to wait to be included. You already belong. And the life you want, one filled with connection, laughter, and peace, is still right here, waiting for you to live it. Here's to living your best life at any age. You deserve it.